attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Joel. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. Paige, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Well, welcome, everyone. This is Wednesday webinar, and today's topic is making the most out of Formspace. And we're hoping you're having a good day and you're ready to learn all about what Formspace has to offer. And I can tell you, as a Formspace user, sometimes people get confused between what Formspace can offer versus like Google Forms. And as someone who's been using Formspace and Google Forms, I can tell you. So Google Forms, as you may know, if you are a user, you can create a form. It's got the ability to have different types of input. You can put in short answer, you can put in multiple choice type options. And then what happens is when all the responses are collected, they're put into a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet can be shared with people, and they can go and look at all those different responses. What's different with Formspace is what happens behind the scenes of when you create a form. So you can have the similar type of connectivity that lets you create the different types of questions, but the difference is in defining what happens in the workflow of where that information goes. So again, like a Google form is going to let you collect all your responses in a spreadsheet, which you can share with someone or multiple people. But in Formspace, you're going to have the workflow that actually sends an email to let the person know the next steps of what to do with that information. So again, it's using the two tools. You can use them in combination. Like some districts will use one to collect information that would be useful in a spreadsheet, and also using Formspace for other types of form collecting and defining that workflow behind the scenes. Paige?
Are you turning it over to me?
I am.
All right. Okay. Well, then I'm going to talk a little bit about, you have to make me the presenter, though. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the basics of Formspace and some of the question types and things that you can do with it. If you have any questions as we're going through, you guys are all muted, but you have access to the questions section. Go ahead and type your questions in, and Joel might be answering some in the background, or he might call some of them to my attention as we get started. So I'm going to start off in our help section, and I hope everyone in attendance is aware of our help section. From anywhere in our programs, from the main page or anywhere, you'll have a help button in the upper right hand corner. And when you click on that help button, it takes you to our online help section. I'm going to go to the Formspace button and get started here with the Formspace terminology page. So roles and rights are something that maybe district administrators would want to look at, but I'm not sure it applies to everybody here today, so I'm going to jump right in with the terminology section. When we talk about documents in Formspace, that's sort of the big overarching title for any of the things that you're doing. Within that category of documents, we have two different types. We have forms and we have surveys. And forms can be at different levels, we'll talk about in just a second, and so can surveys, but they have some different advantages, disadvantages, or different features, really. I don't think there are any disadvantages to either of them, but they function a little bit differently. And so it's important to understand what kinds of documents you can create in Formspace and when you might want to create those different kinds of documents. As Joel mentioned earlier, one of the advantages of Formspace is the workflow process, which allows you to set up a form to go to multiple people in whatever order you want it to go to, so that you can have some people who have approval rights. They go in and they have to approve it, and it goes to first the principal for approval and then a district level person for approval or whatever. But you can also have some people who just get notified as part of that workflow. So different people can take the information that comes from that form and do what they have to do with it. So the workflow is a very valuable part of Formspace. It allows both the user who creates or submits the form and the people involved in the process to keep track of where that form is. If it does get lost on somebody's desk electronically, you can go in and see whose desk it's stuck on, unlike those paper copies. When we're talking about the recipient in Formspace, that's the person who's going to get the document, the receiver. So they don't have to be an approver. They don't even have to be part of the workflow at all, but they're going to get that information at some point. It might go to somebody else for approval first, but they're the ones who will end up with that information. There are 3 levels of documents: district, school, and web. And all of them are created in the same place, which is the Manage tab in Formspace. Now, not all of your users will have the Manage tab. That's something that you'll need to think about: who needs to be able to create them, who just needs to be able to fill them out, who needs to be able to be part of the workflow process. Only the creators will have that Manage tab. Unless you can be a manager of a form and have the Manage tab, but the only thing you'll see is the one that you're in charge of. So district documents are created by staff members who have the Formspace administrator role. So that's going to be a fairly small number of people in your district. And those are going to be forms that everyone in the district can see. So it's important to think about what forms you want to create, what surveys you want to create, and which ones of those belong at the district level, which ones belong at the school level. Because you can have a form at the school level that only people at that school can see. Those are our school documents. And those can be created by anyone with a school administrator or Formspace administrator role. But if I have a form and I create it at the school level, but maybe all elementaries need to use it, I don't have to have that same form at every school. I can create that form at the district level and then restrict or set some of the settings up to make it specific to each campus. So any form that's going to be used by multiple campuses really should be a district document. Anything that's only going to be used by a single campus would be a school document. And then web documents can be also created by Formspace administrators, or there's another role called Public Web Administrator. Again, those are both fairly small numbers of people who would have that access. And web documents can be accessed completely outside the system. You don't have to be an account holder in Eduphoria, so you don't have to be a district employee. So those are great for community and parent surveys. Anything that your board wants to know how the community feels about something can be done through a web document, a web survey or form, and then the person does not have to have that account in Eduphoria to access it. Okay, so how do I know what I want to create? And again, these little charts are in the help section that you can find anytime you need them. Let's compare forms and surveys. Both of them have data collection. So from either one, you can get information back. What you can get back varies just a little bit. In a form, you can get Excel and PDFs, and you can also do a mail merge from a form. So you can collect form data and then upload a letter that you want to send out to those people and do the mail merge between that letter and the data from the form. With a survey, you can't do that because surveys are really one-way communication, whereas forms can be multiple steps involved in that communication. A survey is just user's going to send it in and that's it. So there's no mail merge portion there. With a form, it's up to the user to find the form. So as a user, I'm going to go into Formspace and I'm going to look at I'm going to say I want to submit a new form. So down in the lower left, I'm going to click on submit a new form and I'm going to look at the categories that are available to me and say, okay, I want to do a transportation form. Let me fill out this trip request form. So I have to go into my account and find the form. With surveys, on the other hand, that they don't show up inside that account. They are going to be based on a hyperlink. So I will get that hyperlink through an email, or maybe there'll be a link on the homepage of my district that says click here to fill out the survey, but I'm going to get the link from somebody. I'm not going to go look for it. As the survey creator, you can narrow down the list of participants by only giving it to people that you email it to, or you can open it up by putting that link out there publicly. And then another difference is with the workflows. In forms, you have multiple workflows with multiple steps. So I could create a transportation form, and maybe the process, the approval process, is different for elementary and secondary. I don't have to have two forms. I can have one transportation form, but I can have two workflows, an elementary process workflow and a secondary process workflow. I can have multiple steps within each of those workflows, so I can customize it that way. In surveys, there are no workflows. You only have recipients. So they're going to, your users are going to click on the link, they're going to fill out the information, and that information goes to the recipient, and that's the end of the process. There's nothing else that happens in a survey. The last difference is that there are fewer question types in surveys than in forms, because some of the form questions are sort of interactive, and there's no interaction in a survey. It's that one directional communication. So you do have fewer choices. So sometimes the decision between form and survey is based on whether that question type is available. Okay, who is your audience? That's we talked earlier about how there are 3 different levels. So you can have district forms, school forms, and web forms. You can have district surveys, school surveys, and web surveys. It depends on who your audience is. So if it's district, it's anyone with an Eduphoria account. Can be limited to a specific school using the workflow. So I could create a district form or a district survey, and I could limit it to only schools that are in a pilot program that we're having, or only schools in one section of my district. So maybe it's the schools that are under one assistant superintendent versus schools that are under a different assistant superintendent. I can do all of that limiting with the workflow. And then you can send them to specific people if you're using surveys, those district level documents. School documents still has to be someone with an Eduphoria account. So if you're talking about district or school documents, in order to access them, you have to have an Eduphoria account. You're limited to users only at the school or department that created them, and that's based on your profile. So if you create it for one school and you're going to have to use it at multiple schools, you'll have to recreate it multiple times. That's why it's better to create it at the district level and then limit it to the school using that workflow. And then the final option is web audience, and that's going to be students, parents, community, anybody else in the world. And you do not have to have an Eduphoria account to access those documents. If they're web documents, then you're going to provide that link, and anybody who has that link can go in and use that particular document. Okay, I don't see any questions out there so far, so I'm going to jump into the next section, which is question types. So I'm going to go to a form that I've already created that just shows all the different question types, and I called it question type so I could find it. So when you go in to build a form, you have multiple tabs at the top where you can create your questions, set your workflow, and some of the other things we'll talk about today. When I look at the questions, this is what my form is going to look like as I build it. So I wanted to show you an example of what each question type would be like on your form. This top one is called title and picture. When you name a form, when you go in on the general tab and you put a form title in there, or when you're creating your form and the little wizard asks you for the title of your form, it's going to automatically generate a bar up here that has that. So this initially said question types instead of title and picture question type. I changed it because I wanted you to know which question type this was. It'll automatically put that title in there, and it'll be orange like this. You have the ability to make changes to it. So I'm going to click on my little edit button over on the right hand side. And here's where I uploaded the picture. Some districts like to put a district seal on some of their district level forms. You can upload that here. You do not have to have a picture. I can remove that picture if I want to. So I would put my title in and then upload a picture if I want to. When I'm done, I'm going to say that I'm finished with that question, and it's going to collapse my editing menu back down, and I'm looking at just my form. To add a question, I would click on the Add Question button up here at the top, and it went down to the bottom of my form, and it puts this on my page that says, what type of question would you like to create? So I have a drop-down list. Title and picture is the one we just talked about. I also have instruction blocks, list questions, text questions, date and time, matrix, file upload, signature, budget list, and labels. So I would select the question type that I wanted. In this example, I selected the instruction block. An instruction block question type just gives you a place to put information. No response is required from the person filling out the form. They don't have to do anything. This is just your place to type in information that they need to know. What's the form about? What's the next step? What do they need to keep in mind as they're filling this out? Any rules? Then I added a new question, and it is a list question. A list question is going to be like a multiple choice. So I have, as an example of a list question, what is your campus? If I wanted to edit this, I'll click on my little edit button, and this is what it looks like where I add in my choices. I also have a show options button for every question type. I can make that question required if I want to. I can set it up as multiple choice, multiple selection, which means they can choose more than one, or a drop-down list. So if I don't want the radio buttons, for this example, I have 3 campuses. I used radio buttons. My former district had 42 campuses. When I had the campus list on that one, I always used a drop-down list. Otherwise, it took up a whole bunch of real estate on my form. So you have those choices. And then you can also include an other option. If I say I want to include other, then they can type in their own answer if my answer is not, if the correct one is not listed there. The next type of question is a text question, and you're just creating a box where they can type in whatever information they need to give you. You do have the ability under show options to set the number of rows that you want it to be and whether you want that box to go all the way across the page or not. So when I click on finish, you'll notice that the box is only halfway. It's only half the width of my form, and it's only 1 row deep because that's what I set as my parameter. Date and time questions allow you to give them a calendar to select the date from. So they can do calendar, and you have the choice of including time or not including time. But by doing it this way, all of your date information comes in the same format. And when you're looking at the spreadsheet later and you're trying to sort by date, you don't have to worry about the people who spelled out the word Monday versus the people who just put an M, or the people who wrote January 1st as opposed to 1/1. It's all going to be in that same format if you use the date and time question. The next question type is a matrix question. And when you go into edit a matrix question, you get to set what the columns are going to be. And I have mine set to be numbers. And I think there's supposed to be a 1 there that I apparently didn't save. And then you also have a place to put your rows. So this is where you're going to rate something. I have mine as numbers. It could be words. I could have done poor, fair, good, excellent, awesomeness, whatever you want to have there. And then under show options, I can make it required, and then I can display my answers either as radio buttons or check boxes. The difference there is circle with a dot, box with a check. That's really the only difference. So then when I say I'm finished, then I'm looking at my matrix question, and they can go in and click to rate each of those items. There's also a file upload question where you can ask them to upload an attachment. You can specify which file formats you want them to be able to attach. So I would just go in to my edit, and under show options, I would list all the file types that I'm willing to accept. If it's not listed here, then they can't upload that file type. And again, for all questions, I have the ability to make it required. So if you have something that they need to include with the form, like a copy of their driver's license or a certificate that proves that they're prepared for something, you can have them upload that file with the form. There's also a signature line question type where they can do an electronic signature. In order for electronic signatures to work, they have to be turned on at the district level in Eduphoria for the whole suite. And then once they're turned on in the management app, they can be turned on for individual forms or individual documents in some of the other apps. But we get that question a lot. I tried to do a signature line and it won't work. Well, it's not turned on at the main level in the management app, and that has to happen first. The next question type is a budget list question, and the name is a little bit misleading because budget sounds like it's going to be money, it's going to be currency, but you have the ability to set up different types. So in this example, I set up, it's going to be the textbook title and the number of books that they need. So they would type in the name of the book here, and they would type in the number of books that they needed here. And it would give me a total of all of the books that that teacher is going to get. When you set up your question type and you go into show options, you have the ability under normal number format to do money, whole number, or decimal, depending on the type of data that you're trying to collect. So even though it's called a budget list question type, it doesn't have to have anything to do with money if you don't want it to do. You can use it for other things. So we get questions a lot about how can I have them give me a list or calculate something. All it can do is sum whatever's in your fields. It'll just give you a total, but it doesn't have to be a number total. And then the last question type is a document ID label, which will assign a number to the form, and you have the choice of having leading zeros or not. In this case, I did say leading zeros, but when a user fills out the form, it's going to change these to numbers. So it would probably be 000000001 for the first person who filled it out, and then I would have a number associated with each form. You may or may not need that, but if you're going to be searching through the spreadsheet of form data that was collected, you might want to have those numbers as part of your search criteria. So that's all of the different types of questions that you can put in forms that you're creating at any of the levels that we talked about. Okay, Joel is going to show you some sample forms, and as soon as I make him the presenter, he's going to show you some sample forms and talk about workflows.
Yeah, I've been quiet for a long time. Those who know me, I know there's some people in the room that are watching this. Brandy sent me a text message saying she's listening to me. I've been quiet for too long. Okay, I want to talk about the idea of the workflow a little bit more. And I'll tell you this, like planning these webinars, we actually plan for what webinars we're doing each week and try to correspond it along with what's going on in schools so we can make sure that what we're providing is kind of matching the planning stages and the things that you're doing at campuses and schools to be ready for summer. So actually working and developing forms is something that can be done now to prepare for working on them and getting them ready during summer and kind of managing the workflows of everything that's going on. I pulled up a form that I made. This was in the district I used to work in before. This was a from scratch form that we built. The need was
Joel, we're not seeing that form.
Oh, what are we seeing?
We're seeing that our outline of the webinar.
Oh, we're on the wrong screen here. See, I'm going to have to move this over, aren't I?
Yeah, there we go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Now I'm showing it from my iPad for some reason, but that's okay. We'll make technology work for us for this. So this was a form that was made from scratch. The idea was we wanted to create a workflow, literally a workflow for when a new person was hired and how everyone is notified from that point of getting them set up into the network. And I'm sure some of you watching this, you have that going on in your district. You're not sure how to communicate that, or maybe there's an automation system in place, but if there's any type of communication breakdown or you're not sure what's like how to kind of set up that communication pathway, a really good way to do it is to do it in Formspace. And so we created a new hire form. It was just in the general form category, and the type of questions, of course, it would just be the employee's name, what school they're going to, the assignment. And you can see, just like what Paige was showing, you can change the width of the blanks that appear. We have the radio buttons, the choice buttons. We can even have where you can select the date of that person. All of this information was included in the form. We even have a separate section, and that allows for some information to go to some users and other information that would not be needed for those users. And so that's all included in this one form. And then the part that's the most important, and this is again what separates Formspace from Google Forms, is what happens in the workflow. And so when you have workflow, you can have multiple workflows and even sections of what happens inside of a workflow. In the case of this one, I'll just open it, but it's all these different people's names are going to be in here. But as soon as the form was submitted, and the person who would do that would be in the HR department, the Human Resources department. So that person who has the new staff member sign a contract takes the information from the contract and puts it into the form, and then is able to create their username and password from that information to put into the form to go to everybody else. So the other people who would receive all of this, and it's a list of people, you won't recognize names, except it looks like mine is still on there. But we have the technology department, you have the finance department, you have the business office, you have people in the curriculum department who are creating their accounts to access Eduphoria, for example, or to access iStation if they're going to be managing that for their classroom. Also getting into the textbooks of what they're going to need. So this one form that contained all that information would go immediately as soon as it was entered to each of these people. And all of these people would receive an email notification letting them know that the form was there. They could actually get all the information that was needed from the form in the email to go through the process of creating all those various accounts. And so it's just an all-in-one stop shop place in order to get all that form data. And again, it was just the questions of whether it's a new person coming aboard, or is it someone where we need to cancel those accounts. And again, I think this form, we started developing it around the springtime to get ready for summer because we wanted to make new teacher hire go so much smoother. We wanted our new teachers to be able to access staff development over summer before they actually became on-contract teachers. We were a district who gave every staff member an iPad. So we wanted to make sure that they would have access to an iPad that they would be using in the classroom, and they could start receiving campus emails, they could get information from the district, they could participate in staff development, they could start learning how to use their iPad. And also, that was my kind of delivery system for a lot of staff development, was to use the iPad. So I wanted them to be able to have those resources, to be able to access those. So that's one way to use Formspace, is creating forms from scratch. But I'll tell you, a really great way to get to know the Formspace system is to log in the Manage tab. If you go down to Eduphoria Community, there is this treasure trove. It's funny, Paige and I, when we were planning this, we would say, this is the treasure chest within Eduphoria, and it's all pre-made forms that other districts, service centers, different people have created and put into this shared community where you can go through them, and if it's something that you would like to use, you can actually import it into your library to edit. Excuse me. One thing I usually do whenever I go to the community is I will click on this refresh button, and it's going to bring in any newer documents that may not have been loaded into my system. And it was real quick on there, but sometimes it might take a few minutes to load all those into your folders. So in Eduphoria Community, you can see I have these different department folders that are available, and I can click through them. I'm just going to scroll a little bit through some of these. And like I said, if it's something that you see that you are interested in adding to your library, you simply just click on one. I always recommend you kind of look through it, of course, make sure it's something you want to use. You can see who shared it, what district created it, when it was submitted, and if it was updated recently as well. And then if it's something that you want to use, you simply click Import Document To, and you select where you want it to go, and then you can edit that file as it's added into your library. So as you're doing forms and you're importing them into your library, you can add them into your general forms area and be editing them, and then when you're ready to publish them, that's going to give you the access to edit the different fields, create different questions. You'll be able to add your logos to it. Like Paige was saying, you can add your seal, your district seal to it if you need that. But any type of form that's available in this library is available for you to use. It's not an extra fee. I didn't have to put in my credit card information. I'm just able to go through and see the different types of forms, and if it's something I want to use, I can just import it right into my own editor to be able to use it as I want. Another thing about the community is you're watching this webinar and you might be trying to explain what Formspace is to someone else who didn't get to see the webinar. This might be a good opportunity for you to show the possibility that exists in Eduphoria Formspace by opening up some of these forms that other districts are using. Again, it's good information because it lets you see who created that form. Oh, Demo ISD, it's a demo page. But it lets you kind of see other districts and how they're using Formspace. And if it's something that you're trying to get more people on your side to go paperless and to use this type of system to manage those background workflows, going through the community to show those different examples may help you see how other people are doing it and help you get more people on your side. And again, it's a good way to demonstrate how different forms are used.
Joel, can you go to a form that you created and show them how they can also contribute to the community? Because we do encourage schools to do that. You may not find what you're looking for in the Eduphoria community and have to make it yourself, but maybe somebody else needs that same thing. And if you're willing to share your forms, they'll be uploaded into the community and shared as well.
Yeah, sorry. I was drinking my water. I was like choking a second ago. So here I am in the editor, and again, this is the type of forms that we use for putting into the system. Sorry, I know that. Let me move this over here page. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I had to move it to my iPad screen, and it's so tiny. Yeah. I'm having to move stuff really slowly. So these different tabs that are here. So we have the general tabs. There's the question. That's the editor. There's our workflows, where we're defining what's happening behind the scenes. The different data fields. I think, are you going through that in the second page?
Maybe a little. I'm going into settings in a second.
Okay. And then the different settings, that's what Paige is going to go through in just a little bit.
The button is not show. Okay, there. I think that's what you need.
I know, I'm having to slide over.
Joel did this on purpose so that he could tell you this is one of the questions we get most often.
I completely self-sabotaged to make it work.
That's right.
But there's this publish button that's on the far right, and when your form is ready, when you click publish, of course that's going to publish it for people to see.
And until you click that publish button, it won't show up for any of your users to be able to submit that form.
Right. So you have to publish it. And another key is to look for the active button. The active button lets you know when it's green that this form is live and people can see it and interact with it. The other options would be for it to be yellow, which is draft. Draft means you are still editing it. No one can see it. No one would be able to see it until you publish it. So it's really important that you, when you are ready to put a form out there on your catalog for people to see, that you publish it.
Okay, so I'm not
And then you can
sure
also
why.
archive. What are you looking for?
I'm making myself the presenter for just a second. Because what I wanted you to see is this button right here, and I don't know why it's not showing up on Joel's form, or I wasn't seeing it on Joel's form. But once you have created a form of your own, you'll have this button that says share this document.
Oh, yeah.
And if you click on the share this, I think it's because you're on your iPad. I think well, I know when you click this document, this button, it will put your form out in the Eduphoria community. You'll notice the Eduphoria community has the same icon as this share button. So if you have created a form that you think would be useful to other districts, we encourage you to click that share button, add it to the community, and let other people use that form. It's a great starting place to not have to go back to the very beginning every time. You can go in and just start from a mostly done form, ready to go, and make a few minor tweaks to it. Okay, Joel, it's back to you.
Actually, I think you're showing elections.
Oh, so I'm next. Okay, sorry,
Yes.
I didn't know. I didn't know you were done. So let me. I accidentally muted myself while I was trying to do that. So
I was wondering where Paige went.
Where I went. I was talking.
We're having a great time. We're pros at this, people. I know
Absolutely.
y'all are watching, and y'all are just like, oh my goodness, where are these people from? We are pros, let me tell you.
So we talked about forms and surveys. There's one other type that I wanted to show. Toward the end of the year, it's a handy thing to have at the campus level, at the school level, especially in secondary schools, but really some of the elementary schools as well, and that would be the elections type. So I'm going to come over here on my Manage tab and go to elections, and I have an election set up just so I can demo it really quickly. It looks similar to any of the other documents that we've talked about. You have your general tab, you have a place where you can put your questions in. So I have 2 questions. They're going to vote for prom king or queen, and I have my options in there so you can put your choices. Who can they vote for? The other thing that you can do is upload ballot codes. So if I do it without the ballot codes, then students could come to the kiosk more than once, because what's going to happen at the kiosk is I would set this up maybe in the library. All the library computers would be set to this screen, and I could just make this full page so that, oh, and I bet y'all aren't seeing that, are you? Because that's not.
No, it went away.
Let me go back to my right window. There we go.
I tell you, we're professionals here.
So now are you seeing my, now you're seeing my main screen and all my junk with it, but the kiosk looks like this. Where did it go?
We're seeing the white screen, the making the most out of Formspace screen.
Okay, I don't know why. Let me make you see that one. Now are you seeing my whole screen?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. When I click on the open kiosk button, I would turn this on in whatever room I was going to use for voting. So the kids would come into the room. It could be a computer lab, and every computer lab is on this screen, or it could be the library, and every library computer is on the screen, or we could have it set up kind of like you do in a regular voting booth, where maybe at lunch we have a table of laptops that are monitored by the Stuco people, and I'm going to walk up to a laptop and vote. So without the ballot codes, I could come get in line 5 or 6 times and vote over and over again. But if you choose to use ballot codes, then I would upload the list of student ID numbers, and I would enter my ID number and say begin voting, and it's going to let me vote. So I'm going to vote for Ryan Reynolds for sure. And then I would say next. I'll vote for prom queen. And next, it says, do you want to cast your ballot? Yes, I would click on cast ballot. And then it tells me that my vote has been sent, and it comes back to the main screen for the next voter. So the next person would step up and enter their ID number, and they would do their voting. I can't enter that same ID number again. If I do, it's going to tell me, oh, no, that's a boo-boo, because it didn't stop me. It's supposed to stop me from voting, and I probably didn't turn something on correctly when I set this up. Let me get back to...
But that's managed in the settings.
Yeah, that's managed in the settings. So here's where you would do that. I would upload my ballot codes here, and it tells me how many available ballot codes. Something went wrong because, oh, I know what went wrong. It's saying used ballots 0, and the reason it's saying that is because on election details, I never started the election. So you have to come over here on the main tab and start the election, and now it's going to count anything from this point forward. See, now it says it's active and ready to accept votes. Now if I went back to that voting kiosk and put that vote in, then it would accept it, and it would count one down, and it wouldn't let me use that number again. So that was my mistake. I apologize. I forgot to start the election before we got going. You can print out the ballot codes, which is just going to be a list of student ID numbers. So if kids came up and said, I've forgotten my ID, you could look it up for them. You can also erase the codes and the votes and start everything over again if you want to. But that's a way for you to create those elections. Again, you can have multiple questions with multiple answers, and each student gets to vote by walking up to the kiosk and doing it. We sometimes get the question, can't we do it on the web? You can do a survey with to have them vote for something, but there's no way to do ballot codes on a survey. So you would not be able to limit it to a single vote per person if you did it that way. If you did it through a survey, you'd be able to put a URL out there and say, just click on this link and go vote, but they could vote one time or 100 times. With the ballot codes and using the voting kiosk, it's more like the actual voting experience. You have to go to a polling place and enter your vote. So that's another option that you have with Formspace that I think has got a lot of functionality for campuses. I'm going to go back to district forms, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks now. So I'm just going to go into any form, and I want to talk about the settings tab. So in the settings tab, there are a couple of things that you can do that will help you as you're building forms. One of those things is importing document questions. So I can, when I'm creating a form, or maybe I brought a form in from the community and I want to add a question in. If it's a question I've already used somewhere else, I can click on import document questions, and I can type in, let me type in field trip. It will find that form, and then it'll show me all of the questions in that form, and I can either leave them all checked, or I can say uncheck all of them, but I want to have the name of the substitute question in there. Or maybe I know that one of these questions includes a list that I want to have. Maybe the substitute's got a list of people and I want to pull from that list. I can select just that one question, hit the import button, and it'll bring that question from the previous form into this new form that I'm creating. So that saves me having to set up that question type over and over again. As I mentioned earlier, my previous district had 42 campuses. So if I wanted a campus question type, that was a lot to set up, which is why I made this one called reusable questions. I have one set up that's school/department. So if I wanted every school and department, that's the whole big list. But some forms don't apply to district level departments. They're schools only. So I have another question type called school that just lists my actual campuses. I can go, if I'm making a new form, and I can import any of these questions from my reusable questions form and bring them in and not have to redo that same question over and over again. I could pull it from a form I'd already used, but I found that having this one set up called reusable questions just made it easy for me to find all those things that I wanted to use multiple times. So I just made that, left it in there. Don't even have to publish it. You can see this is not published yet. So nobody can see that form but me, but it's going to help me save a little time when I'm building those forms. Another thing that you can do on the settings tab, well, there's many things, but one of them is erase all of your responses. So if you have a form that you do every year, at the end of the year, I would want to go in and go to my reports, and I would want to get the data. I would go into my form, say which one I wanted, and I would probably print it as an Excel spreadsheet. I would export all of that data to Excel so that I had everything that's currently in this form exported into an Excel spreadsheet that I could keep. And then after I had that spreadsheet that included all of my 15-16 data, or at the end of this year, I would include all my 16-17 data. Then I would go back to that form and go to the settings tab and erase all document responses. I'm blanking out my form. So when they come back at the beginning of the year, we're starting all over with another school year's worth of responses. I downloaded last year's, kept them as a spreadsheet. Now I have all of this year's data in that form. And at the end of this year, I'll download that into a spreadsheet and blank it out again. So you don't have to keep making that form over and over again and naming it 15-16, 16-17, 17-18. I'm just going to use the form at the end of the year, export my data, and blank it out and start all over.
Hey, Paige.
Yes, sir.
Tammy had asked in the chat before, she had asked the question, how do you print a form?
Okay.
And maybe you just kind of showed that being able to pull all of those into that analysis area.
And I guess that's the question. Is she wanting to print a form, or is she wanting to print the data from a form? Because
it was from earlier, so it
Okay.
just says, how do you print a form?
So I'll talk about both really quickly. If I want to print all of the data from a form, I'm going to go to, and it looks like the same thing. If I did a form, I'll come here. If I did a survey, I'll come here. But either way, I still have to choose some more things. So it looks like there's only 2 reports, but really each one of these 2 report types are customizable. So I would go in and say which report I'm interested in. And then I can go in and say, do I want to filter it down and show only from one school, or only one staff member, or only a specific window of time, or only specific questions from that form? So I can narrow down from that one form that I selected what are the specific things that I want to include. Or I can do some built-in summaries, summary options. These are the key things. What do I want to include in this report? I'm going to leave everything as is. I'm just going to say field trip request, and then I can export the summary to Excel, which I don't like to do because it has some formatting stuff, because the summary is this over here. It's going to look, if you do it as a PDF, if I just say print summary report, it's going to give me a little chart for each question, and then this pie chart graph that goes with each question. And the Excel spreadsheet version of that is broken into those question by question chunks. What I usually want to do is export it to Excel. It's going to download that Excel spreadsheet, and then I'm going to be able to open that up and manipulate the data in any way that I want to. Now, if I want to be able to print one person's submission, so
Yes.
I filled out the form and submitted it, and I want to be able to print just that one person. The best way to do that is one of the people who's a notification step or an approval step in the workflow. They all get an email that includes all of the answers on the form for that one submission. So if you're the person who has to print them out and keep the paper copy of it, you need to be a notification step in that workflow, and then you can just print all of those emails out. So that's going to be your best way to get one individual. I can also come here, and I don't know why I must have a bunch of answers in there because it's taken a while to download my spreadsheet, but I could also filter by staff if I needed to and go in and say, show me only, my teachers, and I could narrow it down to a smaller number of people. But, or if I could make a district group and only the people from that specific group. So I can narrow my forms down this way to some degree. But if I wanted to see an individual person's, I would probably want to print it from the email, and the email comes from the notification or approval process. Okay, so it downloaded a corrupt version. It says it's unreadable. I don't know why. But what I would have here, you can see, is going to be a spreadsheet with all of the information, and then I could manipulate this however I wanted to, sort it, do whatever I wanted to do. Okay, I did also want to show one last thing on the settings tab, and then we will wrap up. And that is, if any of you are at the district level and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be the district person who has to create all of these forms for all of these uses in my district, do not fear. There is a way to distribute that work just a little bit. So I can go into any form and go to the settings tab, and I can assign reporting rights and or manage rights. So if I went in and said, I want to add a person, and I'm going to add Joel, and Joel's not going to show up, I bet, in my demo site. He's not. So I'm going to add myself in. So I'm going to add myself as a manager. I can give myself reporting rights, which just allows me to go in and run reports, or I can give myself manage rights, which allows me to do everything, questions, workflow, data, settings, everything for this form only, plus reports for this form only. So if I make somebody a manager, and when I come in here, I'll see that this person has manage rights. I don't have to do the questions for them. All I have to do is say, I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to put it at the district level. I'm going to call it, let's say it's going to be the student council officer form. So maybe multiple campuses are going to use this, and I'm going to put it in general forms, create it and begin editing it. I don't have to do any questions. I don't have to do any workflow. I'm going to come over here and say, Paige is the Stuco sponsor. Let her be in charge of it. And I'll make her the manager. And I'm done at the district level. She has the form now. She can go in and put the questions in. She can go in and set the workflow up and get all the data out. So you don't have to make everybody a Formspace manager. You just have to create those forms and assign specific manage rights for that specific form. So hopefully that will save you some time as you're going through and getting your stuff set up. Joel, do we have any questions that need to be answered here in our last couple minutes?
How could you make a survey anonymous?
When you create a survey, if I go in and say I want to create a new document, and I want to do, really I think any of them, let's do, I'm going to do a satisfaction survey. When I set it up, under settings, I believe there is a place here where you can require CAPTCHA, so you can make it do one of those little number letter things so that you know it's not going to be a specific person. I mean, not going to be a bot. And then I suppose if you just did not put any questions in about the name, it's not going to pull anything. If it's a survey, it's not going to pull their account information because they're not having to log in to get to it. They're just going to go to the URL. So if I didn't ask a question about the name, then that would not be part of it.
That's right. When you make a web survey, it
Mhm.
creates the web link like she has there on the screen. And that web link is what you send out, or you can post on a
So,
website.
so I
And
can
when people
post this
click
on my
it,
website, or I can embed the survey into my website, or I
right.
could email this to a specific group of people.
Hmm. And
And
it
then
doesn't collect identifiers.
it only collects the information in the questions that you put. So if you don't put name, then it won't collect their name because they didn't have to type it in. Okay, got a follow-up question. Oh, that's in the workflow. So that does not apply to surveys. The follow-up question was somebody's going to be notified after each response. That is in the workflow, so that's for forms only. For surveys, there is no notification. The data just goes in to the person who's responsible for that survey.
All right, here's a question. This is
Okay.
from Mary Jo. She has a workflow question.
Okay.
How do you have to go to different people based on the answer?
Okay.
For example, one district form, but different principals based on the campus.
That's an excellent question. I'm going to go in and show you just really quickly. Let me grab something so I can go in. There are two things that you can do. So one, I can have two different workflows based on that same form. So one workflow goes to district staff, they just do different things. Or I can go in and on the workflow itself, when I open it up, I can say limit it to the following schools and have it only go to specific campuses, or I can have it go to all schools. And then it's going to go to everybody. Once I get past that part, and let me save this and move to the workflow, I have another level that you can use. If it's going to, let me add a workflow step. This is going to be an approval step, and I want it to go to principals. So I'm going to say pick a group. I'm going to pick my principals, but I'm going to come over here on the right-hand side and say limit to school. So that means if I'm the submitter, Paige Parker, and it says that I'm at Adams Middle School, this limit to school means that the approval step is only going to go to the principal at Adams Middle School because we're limiting it to the principal at the school that the requester is from. So that's another way that you can make the form only go to the people that you want it to go to. Did that answer the question? If not,
I
throw a
think so.
follow-up in there. We are coming up on our last couple of minutes, so I did want to mention an upcoming webinar that we have going on, and I don't think y'all were seeing my screen when I was showing that, were you?
I was seeing it.
Okay, good. So our next webinar is March the 8th, and I'm going to go back to our Eduphoria help section, and under announcements, you can always find information about webinars in the future. So our upcoming webinar is this March 8th, Building Aware Views for Campus Data People. It'll be at 2 o'clock, another Wednesday webinar, and Catherine and Jenny, I believe, are going to show you all of the things that you need to know about setting up those different views in Aware for different people. If there aren't any additional questions, then I'll thank you for your time. If you do have questions that come up after the fact, you can always email training@eduphoria.net, and one of us will get back to you.
Yes.
All right. Thank y'all very much for your time. Say
Thank
goodbye,
you,
Joel.
everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your week.
Yes.
We'll see you possibly next week for the webinar.
All right. And let us know if there are any webinar requests. If there's something that you want to learn about, email that to training@eduphoria.net also. Thanks again and have a great afternoon.
Bye, everyone.